Good morning. It is good to be with you and to be able to share a bit of this bright spot that we think has happened at Bread of Life over the last several years. As mentioned, I'm Pastor Taryn Montgomery, and I've been serving in my first call at Bread of Life in my 6th year now. And to paint a little bit of a background of what this congregation has been through and looked like over the years, there have been some real highs and lows in its relatively short life. And when I arrived in 2011, there had not been a stewardship campaign or program for many years. Prior to that, in 2008, just for an example, the congregation had given $100 in mission support to synod and church-wide ministries, which certainly was not even hardly on the percentage of what they could be doing. In 2011, when I arrived, they had etched up to $1,200, which was an improvement, but still certainly we had movement in places yet to go. I'm proud to say that today, as of 2016, we are at our 10% and hopefully moving higher, giving $28,500 in mission support in that previous year. This has not come, of course, without also an increase in our annual giving. And just by teaching and preaching and living stewardship, especially living and giving generously. The very first year that we had an annual stewardship program, we saw an incredible increase of over 80% in our estimate of giving. Not only did this enable us to do a lot more within our congregation, but the availability of resources to reach out to our community was huge and was also happening about the same time as other movements and changes around us. This is certainly an exceptional movement that has taken place at Bread of Life. But it's not been without a lot of education, growth in our understanding of abundance, and certainly faith. So today I want to walk through, using different illustrations from our congregation, the kind of changes that we've had to make in our understanding of what it means to live and give generously. The first and obvious change that we encountered was to establish a stewardship team. There had been no functioning ministry for several years. So not only was I looking for leaders who had gifts in finance, but also those who got stewardship, those who understood what it meant to live out their faith in generous ways, not just financially, but in sharing of all that they had been gifted with. Secondly, we were looking to listen to the stories of stewardship that were already happening around us. So who in our congregation, in our midst, was living generously and yet maybe hadn't had the opportunity to articulate that what they were doing was an act of stewardship, an act of faith. From that, we moved into helping our members realize their own capacity to give, and then providing opportunities for them to give. This seems like an obvious thing, but I began to see that without obvious opportunities, not everyone knows when, how, or where to share those gifts. And finally, we had to tell the story of those stewardship experiences that were already happening, that were soon to be happening, but also in giving thanks for those gifts among us and those stories. So to unpack the listening of those stories, I want to share with you first about Tom. Tom, as you can see here, one of our members, is a very generous person. He's been living this his entire life. But in my early conversations with him and getting to know more of his story, he said something to me that really stuck out. He said, "I have never been able to outgive God. I've never been able to outgive God." The moment he uttered those 3 words, outgive God, those stuck with me, etched on my own understanding of what it meant to live and give generously. Likewise, Deidre, who's in the photo with her family, she didn't grow up in the church, and so stewardship was a whole new concept to her when I asked her to recently be on a capital campaign committee. And as we were sitting around the table one afternoon talking about how we'd come to understand what it means to be generous, she said, "It's this congregation in my adult life that has taught me what it means to be generous." This can be seen in her family as well. Her 2 young sons both signed commitment cards for that same capital campaign, giving monthly of their allowance, parents teaching children what it means to live and give generously, not just for the sake of our congregation, but also the community. And it's also in me. I have to ask, along with my husband, what is our stewardship story? How do we live into our understanding of gospel giving? How do we teach that to our children? And what does it look like for me as a pastor? If I have certain hopes and expectations of my people, I better be willing to step up my game as well. Leading by example, modeling that generosity for others. Moving forward and helping others to understand and recognize their capacity to give. I come to see that preaching and teaching and annual programs are very important in this effort, but so is experiential learning. People have to feel what it's like to give, and a little creativity certainly helps in this as well. Every year, our confirmation kids are given a project or help to pick a project themselves. And last year, the kids wanted to help out the local domestic violence crisis center. The crisis center lost their building in the flood of 2011 in Minot, and they had incurred about $200,000+ in a building loan. They had $65,000 remaining. And the community was trying to gather around them to help raise money for that. So the kids came up with the idea they could put together a video, plaster it all over social media, call it Give 65, with the notion that we spend $65 every single day on a meal out with the family. We spend $65 on a couple boxes of diapers at Target, filling up the gas tank in our big truck in North Dakota. Those things that we spend this money on, what if one day we were to give $65 to the DVCC, and if we all pitched in a little bit, how could that help them reach their goal? Well, we didn't raise $65,000 altogether, but it was certainly a help towards that. And more than this, it was an opportunity for our youth to experience what it felt like to give. Because I asked them, if we're going to do this and ask others to give, I expect each of you to give $65 of your own. And asking them afterwards, what was that like for you, your response to that experience of giving? A couple of them said that they, first of all, didn't realize the need in our community for this domestic violence crisis center to exist. Because along with this, we visited the center, we met with the staff, we learned about the services that they provide. But along with that, they also said it felt good to give. And one of the youth said, even as a teenager, I realized that I have something to share, and I grow in my faith by doing so. This whole experiment, if you will, with Give 65 has helped me to play with this idea that people have to know their capacity in order to learn how to share generously. Moving from that place into providing opportunities, I mentioned that there was a flood in 2011 in Minot. It devastated many families and homes and businesses, but also a few of our ELCA congregations in Minot. Bread of Life, where I serve, is up on the hill and was dry. But as a process of that, we opened our doors to one of the congregations that was flooded. And so for 2 years, we shared worship and space and staffing needs and programs. This really helped our congregation to open up not just our doors in our building, but our hearts and our faith to sharing that with our brothers and sisters. This was a huge transformational experience for the congregation. At the same time, we began to realize that many of the playgrounds and green spaces in town that were in the valley, which is just happens where many of them are, were flooded and would be unusable for several years. We sit on a really beautiful green space up on the hill, and so it was a no-brainer to use that space to put in a playground and a pavilion that was entirely open to the community. This project in total was going to be well over $100,000, but the congregation saw the need and was not afraid to step forward and answer it. In doing so, we built this playground together. It stands today completely open to anyone who wants to use it any time of the day. And within that project, built by donations within the congregation, within the community, and some grant money, between that and sharing our space with Augustana Lutheran, I think our congregation realized that we were being transformed by reaching beyond ourselves. It had changed the perspective of survival that this congregation had sat in for many years. Instead of seeing the scarcity of money or people or resources, we began to see abundance, green space, sweat, time, and in the process, our own financial growth. Along with this, we realized the importance of telling these stewardship stories along the way. Some I've mentioned here and others. Every year during Lent and sometimes during Advent, we lift up different members and their faith stories or mission moments. In fact, tonight and tomorrow, one of our confirmation youth will be sharing his understanding of what it means to be a part of our congregation and body of Christ in worship. We'll continue that throughout the season of Lent. one way for members to help articulate for themselves, but also for others to hear how God is actively a part of their life, whether it's through stewardship, whether it's through outreach, however they are expressing their faith. Another story that we began to recognize and help our youngsters to tell. A couple years ago, we celebrated our 25th anniversary at Bread of Life. And as a part of this, one Sunday I got up in front of the congregation and I said, I need $500 by next Sunday. See what you can do. It was not a problem. All of a sudden I had $500, and so I took envelopes and I stuffed each of them with $25 a piece. And on the next Sunday, I handed them out to all the kids at the children's sermon. And I said, this is a gift to you from your brothers and sisters in the congregation. And I want you to take it, but here's what you need to do with it. You have to spend it on someone or something else. You have to share this money, whether it's with a charity or buying items for the local food pantry, something that's for someone else. And then I want you to bring a picture and that story back with you. These are some of the things that those kids came up with. Whether it was donating to the animal shelter, helping out with one of the flood recovery efforts, raising money to the Walk for MS in support of one of the youngsters' grandmothers, our kids took these gifts that had been given to them and shared them with others. The cool thing about this experience, I think, was that they were able to then articulate what it felt like to give, teaching from an early age the importance of generosity and the significance that plays in our life, but also in our faith. Likewise, another story or example of how we have told stories. This past fall, our annual stewardship program was created in-house, put together by one of our confirmation youth who actually helped me in the editing of videos, but we called it Live and Give Generously. And we highlighted two families in our congregation, George and Janice Officer, pictured here, who are charter members of Bread of Life, well into their 90s and beyond gracious in what they have given in every way to our congregation over the years. And also the Hansons. This family has been at Bread of Life for 3 or 4 years, and in that time has grown tremendously in their understanding of what it means to tithe, but also to teach generosity to their children. For example, their two oldest, Bryn and Owen, last year for their birthday parties, asked that their friends not bring gifts for them, but instead bring donations for the Violence Crisis Center and also for the food pantry. And after the party, those two youngsters took those items to those places, and the experience of giving and the generosity that they encountered in doing so was really powerful for these young kids. Likewise, this family alone has invited and welcomed 4 other families into the congregation as new members purely by invitation and saying what we're up to here is meaningful and powerful and we want you to be a part of it. Today, as stewardship committees, church members, pastors, deacons, leaders, we must be willing to listen to the stories that are already taking place, to help guide and direct, and then provide those opportunities in telling the story and finally saying thank you. Right now at Bread of Life, we've actually entered a capital campaign to add on to our current building to meet the growth needs that we have. This has been a huge learning curve for me. Leaving seminary, I did not think I had any gifts in stewardship at all. So in big and small ways, I have learned a lot along the way. But before going through this capital campaign and my learning experience with it, when we sent statements to the congregation to say what they had been giving as opposed to their pledge, we only sent the statement. Now we send a letter of thanks with the statement, but not just thanking them, also sharing a story about how their gifts have been put to use in the congregation and in the community. Whenever I hear of someone making a significant gift, whether it's of a large amount or I know it's a large amount and sacrifice for that person or family, I'm sure to say thank you, send a card, pay a visit, let them know that that generosity is appreciated and that their gifts are being put to good use. I think we are called to lift up the generosity that's already happening in our midst, whether it's through worship, through preaching, through life together. We have to help folks see how the Holy Spirit is working among us, thanking them for being a part of the stories, our story together. In closing, this section is considered a bright spot. And in Bread of Life, I think we have a lot of bright spots that I'd hope to highlight this morning in our attempt to live and give generously. But I want to leave you with one bright spot that really sticks out to me. At Bread of Life, we, every Sunday, have something called the Children's Offering. So during the offering, as the plate is passed, the kids are also invited to come up and give an offering as well. And it goes to a different cause based on what season we're in or what we're raising money for. The example before you is when we were raising money for the playground project. So they'd come up and send their loose change down the slide. It'd make lots of noise at the bottom. They loved it. And the rest of the congregation loves it because they just dig into their pockets and give every kid that passes something as well. Well, this past spring, myself and 2 families had gone to Fargo, North Dakota to visit a congregation there to observe their faith formation program as we think about our own program. And we worshiped with them that Sunday morning. And as a part of the worship, when it came time to the offering, a little girl named Bryn, who was with our group, heard it's offering time. So she dug into her mom's purse for all the loose change that she could find, and she made her way down that long pew, knocking knees as she went. And I was on the very end of the pew by the aisle. And when she got onto the aisle, she realized there were no other kids going forward. She realized there was no children's offering. Now you have to know Bryn. She's a bit of a feisty one. She's actually the one in purple in this picture. But she turned around and she looked down the pew at her mom, and she had this scowl on her face, this image of disappointment. It's etched in my memory because in Bryn, it was written all over her, the deep desire of the human heart to give, the call of our faith. We want to give. We want to know that our gifts are being used to benefit God's kingdom, and I saw it in the face of a 3-year-old. You see, the power of these stewardship stories, or these bright spots, is that they are intimately connected to mission. People want to see, touch, and feel that their effects and their gifts have on others. But more than this, we want to live and give generously. And when we do, we too grow in our faith and our understanding of how God shows up all around us, even in a little Bryn. For we are not giving just for giving's sake, but we are giving for the sake of our neighbor and for the sake of the kingdom of God. Thank you.